Hey everyone, you are listening to another episode of the All Things Private Practice podcast. Make sure to like, download, subscribe, and follow so that you can get weekly episodes. I am joined today by a very good friend, a local Asheville therapist, coach, freelance writer, and Enneagram teacher, Monica Leblanc. She sees clients in her boutique therapy practice who want more connected relationships with themselves and their dear ones. She uses a combination of parts work, internal family systems, the Enneagram, and dynamic attachment repatterning experience, or DARE, to help recovering people pleasers alchemize their plan and purpose and meaning and create alignment in their choices. She's also the co-owner, along with Elizabeth Gillette, of Held, an integrative attachment collective coaching program and retreat host. I'm not going to read anymore.
Yeah,
Can't do it. But Monica's awesome. We are recording this on a Saturday because Monica messaged me a bunch of ideas this morning and last night. And I thought, man, okay, let's make this happen. And we're going to talk about how loving the past versions of ourselves allow us to be more present in our day to day. I know I botched what you gave me, but that's kind of my takeaway from it. And also, we're going to talk about some neurodivergent stuff, how that kind of interweaves into that topic. Because, Monica, you just got a late in life diagnosis of ADHD. And I think when we're talking about loving past versions of ourselves so we can be more present in our day to day, like ADHD thrown in the mix, there's a big conversation there, and that's a huge topic. So one, I want to just say thanks for coming on. Thanks for being willing to be vulnerable and share your story. I know I botched what you wanted me to say. So can you tell the audience a little bit more about what I was talking about?
You did so great. You did so great. And thank you so much for thanks for being willing to have this conversation with me. So basically, I think there are past versions of us, that past parts, I would say, in my therapy with folks, that we have feelings about, right? Like we think they're bad, or we think they were naive, or they were dumb, or they could have, should have, would have done something better and different.
Sure.
And the parts that are shaming those parts that are upset, right, are keeping us from welcoming in our current identity in all of its complexity. So I have an identity post diagnosis that I'm stepping into, and I have an identity pre-diagnosis that I'm working on loving and having more compassion for.
For sure.
And my previous versions, my past parts pre-diagnosis, really need the compassion and the awareness of this current version of me.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking a little bit off screen about the grief relief process that I often talk about with late in life autism ADHD diagnoses, because for so many of us, right, like we've gone through life questioning so many things. Mainly the biggest question tends to be like, what's wrong with me? And you're seeking these answers, and it's so overwhelming, and it's so painful, and it's so alienating and lonely. And you try all the things, right? Like, I did this therapy, I did this therapy, I did this, I did tried medication, tried mindfulness, tried being more present, tried doing all the activities, being more active, and you're just like, nothing works. And I think that you can fall into this place of like deep, dark despair, hopelessness, that this is just destined to be the rest of your life, to walk through life always kind of feeling like on the outside, thinking about why you can't truly embrace the experience or understand your own experience. And I think that like questioning the why behind things is really important for neurodivergent people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that for me, I went through phases of attaching the what's wrong with me to different modalities or explanations of what's wrong with me, right? Like I have the self-preservation Enneagram 2 pattern, which is the most quote unquote childlike Enneagram pattern of all the 27 different types. And so for a while there, I was like, oh, okay, like I just can't get my shit together because I have this pattern. And it felt like kind of grinding the gears to try and make that behavior be different, even though I was working on having self compassion. And then, right, like I tend to embody the disorganized attachment style, right? And like folks who embody disorganized attachment also really struggle with executive functioning and like figuring things out and distress tolerance and rejection sensitivity. So, like, there were all of these things that I would be like, oh, awareness and awareness and awareness. But there wasn't anything that actually landed in the application realm for me to where I could actually start to make some progress and embody a more adult kind of version of myself.
Yeah, I love that because there's a lot to pick apart there. And first of all, I want to just say that when I first moved to Asheville back in 2011, I did a group Enneagram training with my nonprofit that I worked at, and everyone there pegged me as a two because I was such a people pleaser. Because I think now looking back, it was just autistic masking. Like people pleasing is a big part of masking, right? So like if I can be of service, if I can say all the yeses, if I can do all the things, the attention's not on me and I don't have to be perceived. So I'm not a two. Far from it. And as I've become more confident in myself and learned to set better boundaries, you're like, oh, I definitely am not this person whatsoever. You're laughing because you and I have had this conversation and you know
Yeah.
me. Yeah, absolutely not. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
But the thing that really draws me into what you're saying is like trying all the modalities and like trying to see where it lands and like resonating with some of it, but it's not fully encapsulating the experience. And you kind of leave like, okay, that hit close to home. It can be applicable, but it's really not it. And you kind of have a sense of like, it's just not the answer. And then all of a sudden, fast forward X amount of years for you. I don't know how many years it's been since you did the DARE trainings that you talk about in your bio. For me, it's been like 7. All of a sudden you're like, oh, it's my neurology. Like it's the way my neurodevelopmental conditions have arisen and presented themselves and shown themselves to be the contributing factors. I think when you start to land on that with a diagnosis, whether it's self-diagnosis, and I just want to say that for our listeners, like I'm a big advocate for self-diagnosis or an official diagnosis from a neuropsych or a therapist or whoever, it almost like flips the script. Like it completely shifts the lens and the perspective. It doesn't change who you are. It certainly changes how you see the world, though.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think that I was trying all of these things and it felt like kind of pushing a rock uphill, right? Like I was, trying to be aware of these patterns, trying to love myself and secure attachment myself into becoming the version of myself I thought I wanted to be.
Right.
And it turns out that I actually needed chemical assistance
Yeah.
to make those things work. And so now, the work that I'm doing on myself and in my business is like so much filled with like clarity and like availability and openness. And I can have a clear thought. And that is so useful for moving forward in my business and in my impact in the world.
And in your personal life, like it impacts everything. And again, I want to say this too to everyone listening, because I know we have a lot of neurodivergent listeners or people questioning their neurodivergence. I'm not going to say go get medicated because I'm not a medical professional, but I want to try to combat and reduce the stigma of medication, especially for our brains, where the chemicals and the hormones and the neurology and the neurons are just firing differently. And absolutely amazing how the shift can happen so quickly where you're like, oh, this is what it's like to focus. Like, this is what it's like to be able to have my executive functioning actually work a little bit. It's really wild because you can feel like a brand new human. Sounds like some of your experiences. I remember sitting in the coffee shop with you a couple weeks ago being like, you should listen to my podcast, Monica, like subtly hinting at the fact that like maybe there's more here than meets the eye with this like constant feeling of like, I can't get out of my own way. I can't figure it out. I feel really murky. I feel really cloudy. I don't feel clear on what I'm supposed to be doing. It sounds like fast forward a month, you feel kind of clear.
I do. Yeah. I got some clarity thanks to you and also like I kind of started surveying people that have been close to me because I'm also, so here's another part of my new identity. I'm also a new mom. So I'm barely a year postpartum.
Yep.
And I had been telling myself this story that I just had mom brain, right? Like that's like a phrase in mom land is you have mom brain, right? You have mom fog. So I was
Right.
like, okay, like it's probably just me being a mom. So I started talking to people that are close to me and a lot of them, surprisingly, were like, "No, honey, you've always been like this."
What? How did that feel?
I mean, so the first memory that came to mind was this friend that I had in grad school, and she used to call me Nader, which was a shortened version of tornado, because I was just like kind of a hot mess and like just chaotically doing things, wearing one shoe, like finding my keys in the freezer. Like I just was kind of a space cadet scatterbrain. But I'm a Pisces sun, double Virgo. So Virgo moon and Virgo rising. So I mask really well. Like I have my shit together and I'm really good at presenting that to people when I need to, right?
Right.
Like right
The
now.
pressure's on.
Yeah,
There's
you
no
guys
pressure here.
see
There's
you
no
guys
pressure
see my kitty cat pajama pants, right?
So that let's pause on that. That's a great statement about masking.
Yeah.
So to the outside world, when the pressure is on, you can show up. And it can like I can almost fake it till I make it situation sometimes. Like I'm just gonna like take all of my mental energy to get through this experience. On the other side of the coin for high maskers, especially high masking women, trans and non-binary folk, and for our BIPOC folk listening. High masking looks very different than males who are high maskers. And it probably felt like chaos for people around you a lot of the time. But people in the outside world don't see the chaos, right? So they don't really know how much Monica is struggling with executive functioning, with being able to have relationships, being able to like move through the world in a way that feels consistent. Like nobody sees that chaos.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been described to me that a lot of times masking, especially for AFAB or female identifying folks, is that like it's very duck on the water. Like for those folks, the inattention is actually and the chaos is so inside it's not as much outside. And that, I heard a description, I can't remember if it was on your podcast or a different one about what ADHD feels like. And the description was that it feels like you're in a car and it's raining and your windshield wipers work 1 out of every 10 times.
We didn't say that, but I wish we had.
I mean, like, for me, it was like, "Oh my god," like, that is exactly what it feels like in my
Right.
brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now that I have this huge responsibility that requires so much, focus and executive function, like, I found myself and people asking me, like, why is this so difficult for you? Like, what's happening there?" And I was asking myself, like, "Why is this so difficult for me to, like, figure out all of these moving pieces?" And I think in certain relationships too, my masking ability helps me survive. Like,
Sure.
it helped me get through school and, in my family of origin, it was definitely really useful to look organized and like I had my shit together and like I didn't need anything.
Yeah, masking is a survival tool at its core. Like the whole reason we mask, right, is so we don't draw attention to ourselves, so that we can assimilate, so that we can fit in, so we can belong. It's a lot easier to like use all of that mental energy, that executive functioning, that sensory energy to like mask in certain situations, so you don't have to answer certain questions, so you don't have to be the center of certain attention, so you don't have to be perceived. But the other side again of the coin is like when you get back to your space, you're exhausted, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're overwhelmed. You don't understand why you have to move through the world like that. It doesn't feel authentic, but it is a survival mechanism in so many instances. And um, I think for high maskers, especially myself included, post diagnosis, unpacking all of this internalized ableism, um, masking also prevents us sometimes from like connecting to our true sense of self because we're so used to like becoming who we think we're supposed to be. You almost start to question like, who am I? What do I enjoy doing? I ask myself that all the time. Megan joked about it on our other podcast, Divergent Conversations. Download, subscribe, share. Um, she was like, I just put in Chat GPT. What do people do for hobbies? Because I don't know. Like, I don't know what people do. And that's a really real experience. Like, to have this feeling of like, I don't really know myself that well if I've gone through my entire life masking, whether it be intentional or whether it be a subconscious process that you've been doing just to keep yourself safe.
Mm. So the way that I frame that in like the way that I think about that is that I have my baby parts who are doing these masking behaviors and have done a really good job helping me survive
Yep.
certain situations. And it's not that I want them to stop doing their job, right? Because I need them sometimes,
Yep.
right? Next time I have to go to a really terrifying group interview or something, or, if I'm ever like talking to Oprah, like I need those
If you're
parts.
listening, Oprah.
That's right. Yeah. If I need those parts to show up and do their thing, right?
Yep.
However, sometimes when I'm not connected to what in IFS we would call self energy, which is like the most divine, the most mature, the most loving and connected non part of you, the core of you that nobody can touch or take away.
Right.
If I'm not connected to that and one of my parts is driving the bus, this is actually really interesting, then the part is making decisions from its wounding and from its survival strategy. So I actually started working as a therapist in the addictions field in 2009. Like that's how long I've been in the mental health
Oh,
field.
we're super old.
Like, yeah, it's wild. So um I got into the mental health field. I like went to grad school, became a therapist, got out, got my dream job at an inpatient facility that I loved and I grew up as a therapist there and like still holds a place in my heart.
For sure.
Um but I remember this afternoon in 2015 where I realized that my wound picked my career. And I was like,
Mm,
fuck.
that lands for sure. I'm sure that
Like
lands for a lot of you.
I was like,
Including myself.
oh my God, this part of me
Yep.
made a huge life decision. What do I do now?
I think about this a lot that so, and this is, I think this is what you're saying in a different phrase or terminology. Like so many mental health and addictions therapists get into the field to heal themselves through the work that they do.
I got into the field to heal my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got in
Yeah.
the to
And
heal
that's
my
why we see like such high rates of, it's a big statement, by the way. I just want to sit with that.
yeah,
Yeah. It's huge to
yeah.
acknowledge that and, put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not at the time when I had that realization, I was pissed. 'Cause I felt like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, my whole life has been about healing these wounds and, like, about other people, and here I am, and I've made my whole career about healing this wound,
Yeah.
and, um, I have a lot of love for that person on that day that made that realization. I'm so proud of her for, like, being willing to be uncomfortable enough to see the truth of the choices that she had made. And obviously, I'm still a therapist. So, like, it didn't end up with me being like, "Oh god, like,
Right. But
I
here's
have
the thing.
to
I'll highlight this.
milk a
In
cow
that
now."
moment, that person, that part decided, I'm going to do a lot of my own healing, right? Because I know you have. You and I are friends. I've been in trainings with you. Like, I know you've done a very deep dive. I do think that sometimes it splits. Like, a lot of the therapeutic community goes that way, and a lot of the therapeutic community goes the other way, where it ramps up in like codependency, people pleasing, poor boundary setting, inevitably burnout. Guys, if you're listening, do the work. If you're in the field, do your own work. I just want to highlight that. Um, can't wait to write my book, Therapy Confidential, inspired by Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, where I talk about the dark side of being a mental health therapist and the field itself. Wow, I just put that on air. That's going to hold me accountable.
I'm
Cool.
so excited about that.
But in all reality, like I want to commend the shit out of you for that. It's really brave to just say it out loud. And I know you as a person, so I know that this is all really factual. Um, so fast forwarding a little bit, you get through that. Here we are in 2024. You're a new mom. You have a newfound ADHD diagnosis. Um, what is life looking like these days in terms of like the work that you're doing, how you're showing up?
Yeah, so, a lot happened between that was in 2015, so, like, a lot has happened over the past 10 years or whatever, and, I think that that realization ultimately led me to, "I'm gonna do my own healing, and instead of making my life about other people, I'm
Yep.
gonna do my own." That was like a moment where I got committed to making that self energy that I talked about the primary, like, source of contact for how I made decisions in the world.
Right.
And so I actually took this job. I think you might have met me when I was still in this job, but I took this job at a college and I hated it. And the reason why I did that is because I was like, again, because I have ADHD, I was like, okay, I'm gonna force myself into like a very structured and boundaried environment where I have to be professional. Because
Yeah,
at the treatment center, like we like basically lived with our clients. Like my office is right next to my client's bedroom. So it's very like informal relationship.
sure.
So I took this like very structured job and I was like, I'm gonna force myself into this rah, 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 corporate box.
Did you do it that way? Like make that voice, make that face?
I really
Yeah.
did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really that's like the part
That's how
of
that
me.
part goes up for you.
Yeah. That was like the part of me that was like, you need structure and boundaries and like
Right.
you need to go get a boring job and like, you know, whatever I was trying to do. So, I worked there for 5 months. I cried every day. I hated it. And I remember talking to my dad, who's an accountant, and I was like, "Why can't I just be one of those people that can just go to
9 to
work?
5 type of person, can be satisfied, can do the job, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed.
Like, why can't I just be that person? Like, my life would be so much easier if I was just like that."
There. Agreed.
Yeah. But I have a sparkle brain, so I did something insane, and I took out a huge loan, and I paid for rent on an office in advance for a year, and I was like, "I'm gonna do this." And I worked on a farm so that I could have food. Like, I
Which is a very ADHD thing, by the way. Like to do this exact process is a very ADHD experience. Yeah.
yeah, I had, like, no idea what I was doing. I just was like, "I know I can't do this anymore,
Yep.
and this isn't who I am, so I'm gonna try and create something that mirrors who I am." And, like, my business has been amazing. Like, I'm so grateful that I get to support myself doing the work that I love with the people that I love. I'm so privileged
Yep.
to be able to do that. And I have always called myself a hot mess business person because people are like, "How are your books?" And I'm like, "What's that?"
What are books?
Yeah.
The
They're like,
scribble that I have on this notepad next to my computer.
exactly. They're like, "How's your marketing?" I'm like,
What
"Quoi?"
part?
Yeah,
I think I've
exactly.
asked that many times.
I'm like, "Oh, I just show up and I do my thing and then things happen." And that's it turns out that, sure, that's been kind of giving me it's been bare minimum well, for me, it hasn't been bare minimum effort because honestly, just doing that unmedicated was a lot for me.
Sure.
But now that I kind of understand my sparkle brain a little bit better, I feel so much more open and prepared to contribute to the world in a bigger way. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to do that.
I love that. First and foremost, do I have a sparkle brain?
I don't know, do you? That's like, I know people call it like neurospicy or whatever, but I've just been calling it my sparkle brain.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a very ADHD process of like, I'm going to create, I need boundaries. I need checks and balances. I need accountability. I'm going to take this job, right? Because that's going to offer me all of these things, which in turn creates so much chaos because the system cannot operate in the confines of like it feels like the walls are closing in. It feels like the Legend of the Hidden or the Hidden Temple Nickelodeon show, and
My God.
ultimately,
That part used to scare the shit out of me, by the
yeah,
way.
horrifying. I mean that show was terrifying. Like think about like these temple guards, like some random dudes in like temple gear hanging around the corners, like. But yeah,
I needed
and
to
then ultimately, you have to force your way out, and that's what happened for me because I worked I worked at community mental health for 3 years. I hated every second of every day, and I kept thinking like I'm gonna have to change my career path because at the time you don't know what you don't know, right? And I never foresaw myself sitting here doing the things that I'm doing. But when I started to allow for my to take that risk, and I, again, very privileged. Similarly, to be able to have taken the leap out of community mental health to start my own practice, it was a horrifying leap. I definitely didn't think it was going to pay off, but I just realized like the more I supported my system and what my system needed, like the flexibility, the ability to go to work at 11 a.m. because I'm not a morning person. The fact that we're podcasting at 9:30 in the morning is crazy to me. Um, to work late if I want to work late, to not work at all if I don't want to work at all, to have control. I've realized so much like when we talk about values aligned businesses, which I think are really important for autistic ADHD or autistic and ADHD people or neurodivergent people in general, values are super important. We are like really entrenched in what we believe in typically. My main value has always been like autonomy slash freedom. And the autonomy and the freedom to make my own decisions, to approve my own PTO requests, to work late if I want, to not to cancel my day if I need to. I will never be able to put a price on that. It is too valuable to me. And I will never go back to a life or a world where I have hidden temple walls closing in on me all the time because I just cannot do it. My system needs freedom. It needs the ability to create. I wrote a fucking book in 6 hours last week because I gave myself space to support the way that my neurology works, to support the way that my brain works, and to start to truly embrace the way that I move through the world.
So, just to reflect on that, Patrick, like, what occurs to me is that you
Have a sparkle brain.
well, also that, but you took that, like, that self energy and that kind of core of who you are, and you gave your parts, your inner children, your little young ones, the accommodations that they always needed and never had. And now you get to be in relationship with them where you go, "Hey guys, I got you. Like I promise that we are going to be okay and that I'm going to take care of us and that we will always have space to
Yeah.
create and to dream and to rest and to play and to have joy in our lives." And I bet that that was huge for them and their healing.
Huge. Absolutely huge. And I love the way you just frame that. I know that's a lot of what you do. So you are the person to talk about that. on this podcast. I mean, it's like a reparenting experience, right? It's like really having to reparent those parts for the parents that weren't able to do that for me. And for so long, I was so ashamed of those parts, try to keep them hidden. Um, I really tried to keep myself small. I think it was a protective factor. Every time I post, every time I publish, every time I create, I'm like, this is like self advocacy at its truest form, but it's also supporting those parts and saying, like, it's okay to be this weird, unfiltered version that I've always truly been, but I've really tried so hard to like minimize or dismiss or like protect. And I think not just in life, but like in business too, the more we're able to authentically show up, the more likely we are to attract and repel based on how we show up. I have this constant question at retreats, like summits, retreats, all the things. People are so drawn to me, but I don't really like people that much. I mean, I like them, but like they exhaust me. I get very overwhelmed. And I always ask my colleagues, my business partner in retreats and other things, like, why? She's like, because you're not accessible, man. She's like, the way you show up, you're authentic, but you are like distant and disconnected from it. And people want what they can't have. And I'm like, oh, that feels weird, but I think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that, this is like a TikTok concept, but there's that black cat, golden retriever dynamic, right? That we, like, find each other and then
Yep. That would be my business partner and I. She's golden retriever energy all fucking day. Shen, if you're listening to this, you know this is true.
and black cat purring in the sun. Yeah.
You know, I'm just gonna like show up when I want to show up. I'm gonna leave when I want to leave. I'm not gonna offer a whole lot at times. You know, I'll do what I need to do.
You know, I had a black cat, and I tell you what, she started out as this, like, very quirky, like, she would, like, fall in weird places. She got stuck in a tuba once, like, she was like, a feral little wild creature, and, if she chose you to be affectionate towards, you were like, "I am the king of the universe, and God is smiling upon me," right? And I think that can sometimes be true in those dynamics is that, both of them come from a wound, right? A wound of like not being seen, not being loved, or not feeling worthy. And so they're just two different reactions. They're two different parts that we probably all have both of those parts.
For
But for
sure.
some of us, it's been more adaptive for that golden retriever part to buck up and drive the bus, right? And for others of us, like you, it's been more adaptive for little black kitty.
Oh, that's so fascinating though. One, I want to just say, I like you. I really like you. And I'm the most loyal. Like I'll go above and beyond, think about you all the time, out and about in the world. I'm like, ooh, my friend Cindy Miller could attest to this. I'm like, I'll send her like pictures of cats all over the world where I'm traveling. And she's like, are you sending these to me because you know I like cats? I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about that association. Um, Black cat, golden retriever energy is very much my ADHD autistic parts. So like that is I'm gonna make some videos on that. Thank you for that idea. I'll
Yeah,
give you
you're
the
welcome.
credit.
Welcome.
But okay, I don't want to diverge too much right now. Reining it back in for ourselves. With all of this being said, you have created something that you want to share and talk about. I want to give you the space to do that. So you have a retreat coming up. I
Yeah.
want you to tell the audience about what it's about, why it's powerful, why it's worth visiting and coming to.
Great. Okay. So one place for me that has been a consistent way that I can be in contact with my secure attachment, with my self energy, is to be immersed in the natural world, um, and to be kind of having the embodied experience of being cozy and safe.
Yep.
And I also know that when someone wants to do their kind of personal growth work, doing it in community can amplify and catalyze those results so quickly. And I have been and had space held and created for me on some amazing weekends life-changing places, like memories that I draw upon when I need that inner resource has been created in settings like this. So in September, Elizabeth and I are bringing HELD, which is our integrative attachment coaching program, into real life. And we are hosting a weekend in Old Fort, North Carolina, which is just right outside of Asheville, um, in the mountains, at these creekside cabins. And we have a chef coming, a professional chef that we've hired, and he is actually his niche is postpartum moms, but he like loves to create food that nourishes people who have been through a big trauma. So we were like, oh yes, super
Yeah.
aligned.
Yes. Yep.
Some like movement happening. We've got a yoga teacher that we're working with. And basically, what it is it's an entire weekend of doing the work, but in a very invitational, slow, and sweet way. So, like, someone could come and be like, I'll be at meals, but I can't commit to anything else. And we'd be like, great. So glad
Right.
you're here. Right.
Yep.
And I think for me, that's what's been missing from some of those experiences is the invitation and having that experience of being kind of in charge of my own experience. But we also have things like experiential reparenting workshops that we're doing. We're doing nervous system regulation. We're doing some really beautiful integrative attachment work. People will get access to my online Enneagram course if they choose to come to the retreat. So they also get like a discounted typing session with me. I mean, there's just like a lot of bonuses. We're doing a group astrology reading with our favorite astrologer, intuitive astrologer. So like it is a jam-packed weekend. But it's full of all of the things that I love and that help me feel grounded in the current version of my self energy. And it's all the things that make my parts feel like
Right.
they don't have to work so fucking hard to survive, right? That they can relax and that my secure, mature self is in charge.
I love that. It sounds like an amazing, really well thought out, intentional experience. So, for those of you listening, if you want to get into the mountains, if you want to do some of the work we've talked about during this episode, I think that sounds like a pretty incredible opportunity. Monica, tell them where they can find that.
So you can go to my website, monica-leblanc.com, and there's an upcoming events tab. It'll be there. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm at Connecting with Monica LeBlanc. I'm talking about the retreat every day for the next 6 weeks. So you can find me there.
Consistency is key for
That's right.
everybody.
You can find me there. You can also visit Elizabeth's website. That's probably where the most information is going to be. And it's elizabethgillette.com/held retreat.
How do you spell Gillette for those of the people who are listening?
Gillette.
Perfect. All of that information will be in the show notes so that you have easy access to all of Monica's information, her upcoming retreat, her event, and everything else that she's got going on. So make sure to follow her on Instagram. Make sure to check out the retreat opportunity. Monica, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story and just being an awesome person and friend. And you're one of the few people who I'm like constantly thinking about in Nashville. Like, I should reach out to Monica to get coffee. So that puts you in like the black cat space for sure. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Patrick. It's such a compliment. And I'm so glad to be able to do this with you and to have this conversation and to have like an aligned offering that I can bring to your audience. Cause like I said, I've been living without windshield wipers. So
I do like that analogy a lot. To everyone listening to the All Things Private Practice podcast, new episodes are out on every single Saturday on all major platforms and YouTube. Make sure to also go to my website for 2025 retreat and summit options, which include neurodivergent burnout in Belize in January, Ireland's Doubt Yourself, Do It Anyway retreat in March, which is sold out and has been for years. The Creating Alternative Streams of Income retreat in Catalonia, Spain in May. The Doubt Yourself, Do It Anyway Summit in Edinburgh, Scotland in July. The Creating Alternative Streams of Revenue retreat in Catalonia, Spain in September. And the Leadership Retreat in Hania on the island of Crete in Greece in November. Hope to see you there. Doubt yourself, do it anyway. And we will see you next week.